Mr. Sriganesh Lokanathan, the fifth panelist for this session, is the team leader of Big Data Research at LIRNEasia, a pro-market think tank based in Sri Lanka, but active across emerging Asia-Pacific regions. At LIRNEasia, Sriganesh co-established and leads multidisciplinary research practice on big data for development. His work involves the conceptualization and implementation of big data analysis to support global development, understanding its implications on society, and mainstreaming its use for social good. He is a board member of the Social Innovation Lab, a joint initiative of the United Nations Development Programme and Sri Lanka's Ministry of Science, Technology and Research. He is also an advisor to the Analytics Unit of Sri Lanka's Ministry of National Policies and Economic Affairs. He holds a bachelor's degree in computer science from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and a master's degree in public policy from the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy of the National University of Singapore. I would now like to invite the panel to the head table and lead us in the session.
I'll try to keep my comments brief, but let me just start with a caveat. I'm not a lawyer. I wouldn't call myself a privacy researcher either, but I work at the nexus of data and a whole lot of other sectors, and studying the implications. Privacy is one of those implications one has to worry about. But the question here is really, how do you define privacy? You know, as my previous panelists talked, it's a very difficult concept to sort of identify. But I want to actually propose that it actually is defined, people identify through use cases, right? And I want to give you one example from myself, and then we'll sort of, I want to work what that means. Not a very healthy individual. I lead an unhealthy lifestyle. I eat too much, don't exercise enough, and I certainly smoke a lot, right? If I were to go into Cargill supermarket and, you know, I have the Cargill's card, over a period of time when I'm sort of, you know, they see my shopping habits, they'll see that I'm buying cigarette, you know, by the packs, right? And if on my next subsequent visit, because of all this history, they tell me that, you know, oh, sir, if you buy, you know, 5 packs, you can get 5 more packs for free or at 50% off. Now that is something that I may want at an individual level. So that use of my information is fine with me. But if, for example, Cargill says that, oh, by the way, we also share this data with our new subsidiary called an insurance, Cargill's insurance company, that's something that I don't want because it will affect my individual premium, right, if I have insurance with that firm. But one can ask, even in that question, you know, am I actually disregarding the public good? Because by withholding that information from trying to prevent Cargill's from submitting that information to the insurance provider, I'm actually contributing to everybody's increases in premium, in their premiums. This is it's a real example from my life. I don't know what the answer to that should be. That's maybe something that lawyers can advise us, but I actually think that the answer is more complex because over time our privacy norms as individuals is going to evolve. I want to then talk about why, you know, the reason that I'm here is I work usually with large amounts of data. This can involve satellite imagery, this can involve pseudonymized telecom data, calling behavior of millions and millions of people. It's being used to try to understand how do people come into and out of cities, how do you improve transportation policy, how do you improve sort of disease monitoring and surveillance, right? The questions there is that we need to rethink privacy in the age of this new data sources, because it's not about the conceptualization of I am saying that I don't want this particular information disclosed or not disclosed, or it should be anonymized or not anonymized. So again, for that to articulate that point, I want to give you sort of an example, and we don't have very good examples from this part of the world. I need to use it from another part of the world, which is which is this, right? So for example, there are large numbers of data sets that are out in the public domain that do have public personal information like name. Like, you can argue that, in certain countries, voter registry data are public data, right? That does give you certain identifiers about a person, right? And then when you go and try and look at anonymized, pseudonymized, large-scale data sets which do not include personally identifiable data, it is possible to actually mix and match and figure out who the person is. So, for example, there's a nice example in Massachusetts, right? Some years ago, where they were talking about privacy issues, the researcher came back and said, one of the former governors, these are your health records. I was able to de-identify it based on public information mixed with sort of pseudonymized large data sets. So the question in all of these is, how do you regulate for those kind of instances, right? Can this be done through a privacy legislation, through a right to Privacy Act, through a Data Protection Act? I'm not so sure whether you will have measures, because what the usual measures that may come about will be to say that you need to have information, that you need to have informed consent, you need purpose specification. All of that is well and good, but this new world that we're living in is purpose specification and informed consent does not make sense. Let me give you the example from, like, let's say you're from Mobitel, right? The record that's created, for example, every time you make or receive a call, right? One could, what is the basis to argue that that is your record? The telecom operator had to actually create that in order to be able to give you the service. So is this a case for arguing for joint property rights for that piece of data? I don't know the answers to that. Second example from more recent going-ons in the United States. How many of you all may have heard about the case of the Golden State Killer in California? Quick show of hands? Okay, let me just give you a quick preamble to that. So there was a serial killer and rapist in the 1980s and early 90s, who came to be known as the Golden State Killer, was never caught all these years. Recently, the police figured out who it was. It was an ex-policeman. He has been accused and now about to face trial. How they found him is the more interesting thing. They had old DNA evidence from all of the crime scenes. They created a fake profile and uploaded it to one of these new genetic sites where you can find out your genealogy, right? To find out where you're from, who are your ancestors, who might be your distant, third, fourth, fifth cousins, etc. Right? There are various services. From that, they were able to target, they were able to identify a subset of families where this person could belong. And then from that point onwards, standard sort of, investigative criminology kicked in, and where they sort of narrowed it. Now, in that particular question, this is not genealogy of a particular individual. This is they have the data from all of these people. The argument here is that is being made now is no person is a genetic island. Could we say that about privacy? In terms of privacy, are we no longer an individual island, or do we actually, privacy needs to be understood in terms of our social connections to others? Because even again, in the world of big data, it is not so much, and that goes back to the questions you raised about Facebook, etc. It is not so much about the data that you have about yourself, it's the data that you have about your friends and your relatives, etc. And how I, as individuals, might choose to disclose that information. How are we going to regulate for that? About what individuals do rather than what states or private sector does. I don't have questions, I don't have answers for all of these. I will sort of end in that, on that point to say that, where we are headed towards is sort of a socio-technological system, right? This is maybe not ready yet in the current context, certainly not in Sri Lanka, if not in the US, where we are not able as individuals to give meaningful informed consent, because if we have to do that in this current economy, we'll be doing that every 2 seconds or even less. is this data okay to be collected or? So the kind of regulations need to be able to sort of address some of this a priori sort of harms based, where the harm was created. Second, where the technical thing comes in, and that will be where we have actually software agents, and this is where it's near future. I realize it's not possible to do this right now, but that's where we will need to head towards, where the technology needs to mature fast enough, where we will have our agents doing this behind us without us actually knowing what's going on. That is the new world that we will have to transition into, and the question for us is, how do we cope with the transition? That's my personal perspectives. Thank you.